I've summoned Eddie back because
Back from hell.
I'm very interested in this idea of taking down statues from public places. And my friend Yuval suggested we should round them all up, put them in a tree museum, as Joni Mitchell called it, put them in a park somewhere. And I think we should put labels on them saying, this is what this person did.
Yeah.
And every year on their birthday, or maybe just there'd be one day for all of them, people could go and throw rotten fruit at them. And so it'd be educational. We wouldn't be losing any of our cultural history. They could go into a museum maybe, but I think out of doors where the birds are crapping on them is better for statues. It's more their natural environment. And they're a bit more scary indoors, I think.
See, they have all of that in Hungary.
The Stalin field. Yeah,
apart from the throwing of the fruit type thing.
They don't throw fruit at it.
No, they don't, because somebody would have to clean it.
But imagine what it'd be like, dark in the middle of the night, and you wake up in a park feeling a bit groggy, and all around you are statues of Stalin.
Statues of Stalin.
This is like a Charlie Brooker Black Mirror story.
All the Lenin statues, all the Stalin statues, all standing there fulminating
as much as possible. So what do you think about it, Ed? That's what I think.
The anarchist in me cheered when that statue of Edward Colston came down.
Yep.
I was like, come on, Black Lives Matter, represent. I was kind of chuffed because the history is the history. It's not going to be remembered because there's a statue of Edward Colston. The history of
he was.
Yeah. And the history of slavery is remembered in a million minds. It's remembered in thousands of books. And that's what we use to learn about it. We use literature. We don't use statues. Statues of commemorating somebody, for celebrating an individual who did something great.
So you think we melt them down?
I think put them in a statue park.
Yeah.
Along with the other statues of Stalin and Lenin.
I grew up in Lichfield in Staffordshire, and there's a statue of, was his name John Smith or something, the captain of the Titanic?
Oh, what was his name?
Yeah, I'm sure Spike will find it put on the bottom. But there was a statue of him in our Beacon Park. We got Edward VII and him. And
captain of the Titanic.
Yeah.
The well-known success.
Well, so, its sister ship didn't do too well either. So I think there may have been a slight design flaw. Human error, though. Human error.
Yeah.
But we got the statue because his hometown, it was commissioned before the voyage, and his hometown wouldn't have the statue.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of statue park I want to see. It's like, send us your homeless, your hungry, needy masses or whatever, and we'll put them in a statue park.
With all the losers.
What about with the Confederate generals?
I think they should go into a similar place. Yeah. The statues shouldn't stay where they are, because we don't celebrate racists and bigots.
We should not.
Unless we're somebody like Donald Trump, who seems to be counterintuitive to humanity.
Yeah, he does seem to have some unusual responses to situations. I remember he was reporting the deaths of, in fact, women and children in Syria from US missile strikes, and he interrupted to say that the chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago was the best in the world. And I thought, this is a distractible man. It's hard for me to take this seriously. And then when he started talking about the oranges of things.
The oranges, yeah.
And beautiful clean coal. Has he ever actually touched any coal? Because I've never
take it out of the ground, we clean it, we put it back.
Yeah, but he's probably got people at Mar-a-Lago that polish the coal. So it's the best coal in the world.
Better than any coal anywhere in the world.
Anthracite, nothing, mate. Let alone the bituminous rubbish that we still buy from Poland in this country because we closed all of our anthracite pits. The beautiful clean coal pits. It's. What about statues of Donald Trump? Do you think we should
Statues
have
of Donald Trump should stay up.
Yeah.
All those statues of Donald Trump that are up now, we should leave those up.
Well, they're mainly inflatable though, aren't they? So
yeah,
and they have, you know, penis shapes and things. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, it is telling that he wants the names of military bases that were named after Confederate generals to remain named after Confederate generals. That's Donald Trump on the wrong side of history.
Yeah.
When we think Fort Bragg should be renamed, maybe Fort McClellan.
Maybe Fort Nice People.
Fort Nice People.
Or
yeah.
not fought with nice people or something like that. I have a kind of romantic thing because as a 9-year-old, we had bubblegum cards of the US Civil War. So I knew more about that than I did about, you know, and Stonewall Jackson always seemed like this, you know, redoubtable figure. And you then heard that Robert E. Lee was, of course, offered the command of the Union Army first and turned it down. And that the principles they fought for, and Stonewall Jackson had, I think, retired and, you know, came back because they believed in the cause of the South and its right to independence. Nothing to do, and of course, 2 of the northern states were slave-owning states.
Yeah.
So it wasn't
the
really about slavery.
States.
But I'm sorry,
you had the 4 border states who weren't in the Confederacy, and then there was the 2 slaveholders.
Yeah. And which is something like Rhode Island and Maryland or something. I don't remember, but
Maryland was a slave state.
Yeah,
I think Rhode Island was.
Okay, I bow to your, in this case, doubtless superior reminiscence. But so as a kid, I had this thing about these guys, and it has to be what they've come to represent, and it has to be time to have a conversation. You know, in Northern Ireland, they've had quite a conversation about what happened during the Troubles, which is, you know, it's like women's problems, the Troubles, you know, the longest military action in British history, I think, of constant engagement from 1967 to 1999, was it? Or when did Blair sign the Accord?
Yeah, I think it was 1997, 99.
Yeah, but the war, the engagement continued for about 10 years beyond that. You know?
Yeah.
Just having all these troops there and messing up, you know, with what's going on there. This astonishing situation, but where women came together and said, we're going to talk about this. We're going to, you know, and there's this wonderful interview with a woman who, her husband, she'd been involved with the IRA, and they'd taken somebody's husband who was a special constable, strapped him into a van, pushed him down a hill, van had blown up. And she'd been involved with the team that did it. She hadn't been active, she don't think she took part in it, but she knew them. And she ended up meeting the wife of the guy these many years later, expecting that she'd punch her, and the woman embraced her.
Yeah.
And what we need to see is some libtards and Confederates embracing, some rednecks, and, you know, whatever terms of invective are being used. And in some, I think it is true that the George Floyd, that dreadful incident, did. Yes, there were some white people involved in the civil rights marches in the 50s and 60s. Mississippi Burning records one of the notorious incidents of that period. But it is true that the majority of people on those marches were black. The vast majority of the people on those marches were black. And now a lot of people of all, you know, who do have some content in their character are going out and complaining and saying, you know, this is just awful. I strongly believe that our schools should teach, firstly, the period when Europe was influenced by the Islamic countries around the 12th century, 13th century, when courtly love, chivalry, the troubadours, the universities, Bologna, the Sorbonne, Oxford, all set up to discuss the work of Avicenna, his commentaries on Aristotle. That period, understanding that washing and perfume and alcohol and algebra come from this culture to the benefit, and quarantine indeed, to the benefit of our culture. And then talk about what happened with the end of the Ottoman Empire and what happened afterwards, without necessarily getting in the contentious points about Israel, though, you know, it was a strange idea, but it's there now, so you know it's there. But what happened, say, in the Lebanon, where the French decided that Muslims couldn't vote,
or mandate Palestine,
with the British, or
mandate Egypt,
Ord Wingate. There are many streets called Wingate Street, apparently, in Israel, because Ord Wingate was a member of, was it the Plymouth or the Exclusive Brethren? And to bring the end times, he had to bring all Jews to Jerusalem where they could be converted to Christianity. So he started teaching Jewish Palestinians, they're no Israelis at that point, he started teaching them terrorist tactics. So they'd be able, and you starts this, as appointed by the British military, this lunatic trains people, just as the Al Qaeda were trained in car bombing, by the CIA. This is a really easy way to blow up a lot of people. Great. And when Hezbollah did it to them, they didn't like it very much. Which was, they actually did hit a military target as well, unlike so many other terrorists that that they have.
Well, the amount of collusion that went on in Northern Ireland, let alone Palestine, where you've got these amount of terrorists who are being sent out there by the British state.
The whole world becomes confusing. What it is. When reports started coming about ETA, the so-called Basque freedom fighter terrorist group, that a number of the offences charged against them had been committed by the Spanish police, the Caribbean Guardia. The Ordo Nuevo in northern Italy, a right-wing group that killed 9 policemen and eventuated in a trial where an Italian MP was convicted, and then his sentence was quashed and he was released. And Gladio, the organisation set up by US, Belgian and British intelligence at the end of World War II, whose funds have gone into that, the Order of the Solar Temple. It's terrible. You don't even have to get into any kind of conspiracy theory.
No.
Name the names, say where the money came from, and show that the interference of the espionage world in the real world has just been cataclysmic. It's been awful. What the US did using the Belarusian SS, parachuting them into the Soviet Union after the Second World War to blow things up. It's not nice stuff. It's not happy. But that takes us away. See, for me, the problem is one of authoritarians, in the sense of people who believe that we should be told what to do all the time by others, and authoritarians in the sense of people who want to tell people what to do all the time. That this mentality in human beings, this immature mentality of being a kind of teenage gang with a president, and you all wear the same necktie or wave the same flag, rather than looking at humanity and kind of going, well, actually, democracy, consultation, consideration, human values, ethics, the European Convention on Human Rights, which Tony Blair rubbed into the dirt. I think there were eight clauses in there that were all reversed. And they come from Winston Churchill, if anybody wants to get interested in the history of it.
That's right.
So Churchill, who is one of the people who are now saying, well, he was a racist, so take his statues down. And he was a racist. What he said about Gandhi doesn't bear repeating. But nonetheless, and an imperialist, a colonialist, that we have to look at the context in which somebody existed, and we have to say which bit of what we're doing is authoritarian, which bit of what we're doing doesn't actually have a reason, for doing it, and what of it is down from on high, from some rule developed about how we ought to live and how we ought to be. Slavery,
Yeah.
of course, is the ultimate form of authoritarianism, totalitarian behavior, and it runs throughout human history. The Babylonians did it, the Greek, the Athenians, who invented democracy, kept slaves.
Yeah.
The founders of the Republic in the United States kept slaves. They didn't recognize the sanctity of human life.
I've been reading George Fitzhugh, who was a writer around the same time as Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Yeah.
George Fitzhugh wrote the socialist case for slavery. What he thought was the socialist case for slavery.
The Quaker case for slavery.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. His 2 books and 1 pamphlet are available online. And he makes the case that slaves have it easy. They haven't got to worry about economic decisions or, the job market. They're not exposed to the job market, so they don't have to have a panic that they might lose their job because they're just going to get looked after. They can just kick back. And slave owners are the best kind of people because slavery brings out the most paternal aspect of these wonderful slave owners.
So they'll do things like the Derby dose, as it was called, in their paternalism. And I'm not going to describe what that is. And anybody that wants to be utterly sick and disgusted, the Derby dose, DERBY dose, which was an adopted method in the Caribbean, used against slaves. And you see the pictures of the marks on whipped slaves' backs.
Yeah.
Just this incredible thought that to infantilize a people and say, it's almost like Freud, isn't it? It's, he calls it the incestuous fixation, but he would, the desire to return to the womb, the want to be commanded and controlled and pushed around. Yeah. And then, there is a personality disorder that does fit that category. It's called the dependent personality disorder. But it is not reckoned to be more than a few % of people. And we have a society that's insisting upon this. And wherever, communitarian societies have built up, there's been some progress, there's been some sense. And then you get some predatory person who rises up and manages to turn what was the happy, loving religion of Jesus into, the Spanish Inquisition, which nobody expects. And, but they find some tortured way of making this thing that's about loving people and doing good into a way of killing people and doing harm.
Yeah.
And nobody seems to get that's, or some people do get it, but many people just seem to run after the flag, and find some reason for their perverse behavior, as it were. But yes, thank you for that. I think I'm going to end this session. Is there anything you'd like to say or ask before I end this session, Ed?
My needle is floating.
Your needle is floating. I'd like to indicate your needle is floating. Would you like to write a success story?
Definitely.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to reading that next time. I'm Jon Atack. This is my great friend Edwin Stratton, and we wish you all a very Merry Christmas, even though it's June. Thank you. I think out of doors where the birds are crapping on them is better for statues. It's more their natural environment.